the government can argue that their approach also had economic validation. Despite the recession, despite migration, despite the pandemic, despite the lockdown, it's the National Democratic Alliance that won a hard-fought election in Bihar. All these factors together, under normal circumstances, backed with 15 years of anti-incumbency, would have been a knockout blow for any government. Despite everything, they still won, Mr. Chidambaram.
If you think that the Bihar vote is a validation of the government's economic policy, I think you're wrong. The Bihar is the poorest state in India. The Prime Minister has been in office since 2014. Mr. Nitish Kumar has been in office since 2005. And yet Bihar is the poorest state. The last persons who should speak about the economy of Bihar are Mr. Modi and Mr. Kumar. Now look at the vote in Bihar. I agree, the Congress party's performance disappointed me, and I'm sure the CWC will take note of that. But look at the popular vote, 37.26% for the NDA and 37.23% for the Mahagabandhan. What is the difference? 0.03. Can you imagine what 0.03 is? It's a few thousand votes. Because we have a winner past the post system, that translates into 125 seats and 110 seats. So don't look at the Bihar verdict as a resounding verdict for the NDA, and certainly it's not a validation of the economic performance of this government.
So what you're saying is correct, yes and no, because in the end, jo jeeta wahi Sikandar, whether it's by a few thousand up or a few thousand down, that's the way elections are decided, and it happened in the United States as well. Donald Trump fought hard, but in the end, Joe Biden was a little in front. If they've been able to, despite all of what you mentioned in terms of economic recession, dispossession, people not having jobs, then the government should have been blown out of office, which didn't happen. It isn't a resounding victory, but it's a victory nonetheless.
I agree. Who takes away from their victory? It is a tribute to their economic management. It's not a tribute to their economic management. It is a tribute to their election management. It's perhaps also a tribute to the tactical steps they took in different constituencies. It's a tribute to the organizational strength of the RSS and the BJP. And I'm not taking away a bit from the election victory of the NDA. They won an election, and therefore they're entitled to form the government, and it's a perfectly legitimate government. I'm only disagreeing with you that it is a validation of the economic policies of the government. That I don't think so.
Sure, but what does it reflect about the opposition? Despite all these problems, and you've been in electoral office, you realize how anti-incumbency builds up. If it is the government and the NDA and the BJP that comes to power, the connect of the Prime Minister with the people, to be able to get them to believe him even now, despite everything that you believe has happened and how people should be reacting to it, ultimately it's the Prime Minister who, through his sheer connect with the voters of Bihar, was able to carry the NDA through. Sitting in opposition, what do you make of that, Mr. Chidambaram?
I don't disagree with you. In fact, I should ask you the question. What did your exit poll say? Your exit poll, India Today's exit poll. So I don't disagree with you. It is certainly endorsement of the fact that the NDA managed the election much better. The NDA carried its narrative much better. Mr. Tejashwi Yadav, a young leader, was pitted against a formidable Mr. Narendra Modi, Mr. Nitish Kumar, Mr. Sushil Kumar Modi, and other tall leaders of the BJP. But why don't you also pay compliment to Mr. Tejashwi Yadav's tireless election campaign, which brought him nearly to the door of victory. He still is the single largest party in Bihar. he edged out the BJP. His resources were a fraction of the BJP's resources. He was a lone campaigner for the Mahagathbandhan, especially the RJD, whereas the BJP had a whole range of campaigners. Therefore, while you endorse and compliment the Prime Minister, please endorse and compliment Mr. Tejashwi Yadav also.